create intrigue, warmth, and the first spark of attraction. The audience should feel the quiet electricity of an unexpected meeting, not dramatic, but intimate in a way that lingers. Open book narrative progression. Introduce the narrator, 22 to 28, thoughtful and quietly observant. Introduce the woman, 40 to 45, confident yet carrying an air of quiet vulnerability. Their first interaction should feel ordinary on the surface, a passing moment, but beneath it, something magnetic stirs. Revolving heart's sensory-rich details. The narrator notices her in an everyday setting, a quiet cafe, a bookstore, or perhaps at a friend's gathering. Describe her presence in a grounded, respectful way, the way she carries herself, the calmness in her movements, or the faint trace of perfume that lingers as she walks by. The key is to show why she captures his attention, not only her beauty, but the subtle blend of confidence and warmth. Their first exchange of words is simple, maybe about the environment around them. But the focus is less on what they say and more on how they say it, the pauses, the soft curve of her lips when she smiles, the way her gaze lingers a fraction longer than expected. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. The narrator feels the tug of attraction, but tempers it with hesitation. He notices the difference in their ages, her more measured way of speaking, the life experience in her tone. He wonders if he's imagining the connection. She, on the other hand, seems practiced at keeping her expressions guarded, polite, kind, but careful not to reveal too much. Rose resolution hint. The moment should close with a sense of unfinished business. Perhaps she looks back just once before walking away, or perhaps their hands brush briefly as one passes something to the other. A spark is lit, and though they part ways, it's clear to the narrator, and to the audience, that this won't be their last meeting. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words. The story should begin with atmosphere. Paint the setting in warm, sensory tones, the low hum of voices in the cafe, the faint sound of rain against the window, or the quiet stillness of a library aisle. The narrator should take his time describing the space before she enters it, so her arrival feels like a small shift in the air. When describing her, avoid exaggeration, instead, use subtle markers of presence. Maybe it's the way her scarf falls loosely around her shoulders, or the calm confidence in how she sets her coffee down, unhurried. Mention her age not directly, but through experience, the steadiness of her posture, the thoughtful pause before she speaks. When they interact, focus on body language and subtle touch. For example, when she handed me the book, her fingers brushed mine, barely a touch, but enough to send a ripple through me. She tilted her head when I spoke, as though she was listening with more than her ears, and for a moment I felt seen in a way that startled me. The narration should linger on his internal response, the quiet awareness of being drawn to someone older, the unfamiliar weight of admiration mixed with hesitation. He doesn't name it love or even attraction yet, only the sense that this meeting matters. End part 1 with a quiet hook. As she leaves, she looks back, not dramatically, but briefly, almost against her will. The narrator holds on to that glance like a secret, show the slow weaving of connection. The audience should feel the excitement of seeing each other again, mixed with hesitation, as if fate is gently nudging them closer, but both are cautious. Open book narrative progression. The narrator and the woman cross paths again, not by design, but by chance. It could be at the same cafe, a bookstore, or through a mutual friend. This time, their conversation deepens. What was once polite small talk becomes something more personal, more revealing. She shares a detail from her life, perhaps her career struggles, her love of literature, or a subtle admission of loneliness masked with humor. He responds with honesty, surprising her with his openness. In that moment, she begins to see him not just as young, but as someone capable of understanding her. Revolving heart's sensory-rich details. The atmosphere is important here. Maybe it's late afternoon, the cafe light spilling in golden tones, or perhaps they're walking outside and the air is cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. Focus on the way they notice each other physically, not in a romanticized or exaggerated way, but through real gestures. She leans in slightly when she speaks, her hand brushing her hair back as she studies his expression. He notices the fine lines near her eyes when she smiles, not as signs of age, but as markers of depth and life lived. Their voices soften naturally as the conversation deepens, creating a small bubble of intimacy in a public space. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. Both characters are aware of the space between them, not physical, but social and emotional. She hesitates, reminding herself of the age gap, of how people might see them. He wonders if she's simply being kind, if he's reading too much into her openness. The tension lies in what goes unsaid, their smiles linger too long, their pauses stretch a moment beyond casual. Rose resolution hint, the part should end with a small but meaningful gesture of connection, something nonverbal that carries weight. Perhaps she laughs at something he says and touches his forearm lightly, instinctively. Or maybe, as they part ways again, she lets her hand rest on his for a second longer than needed. It's not yet romance, but it's undeniably more than friendship. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words. The second meeting should feel natural, unforced, like the world giving them another chance. Describe the moment he sees her again, not with shock, but with a quiet sense of inevitability. Of course she would be here, he thinks, though he knows it's just chance. As they speak, layer in small revelations. She could mention a book she loves, a memory from her travels, or her admiration for something he has said. She doesn't bare her soul yet, but she lets him glimpse pieces of her life, pieces she doesn't usually share so easily. The narrator's perspective should highlight respect. He admires not only her beauty but also her steadiness, the way she seems grounded in a world where he still feels like he's finding his footing. When describing their closeness, focus on subtle sensory details. Her laugh came soft but full, and as she reached across the table, her hand grazed my arm. It was nothing, really, a casual touch, but I felt the warmth linger long after. Her eyes held mine when I spoke, and though there were people all around us, I felt as though the two of us were standing in a quieter, separate space. End part 2 on a note of growing awareness. As they part, he feels reluctant to leave. She hesitates before walking away, as if she, too, doesn't want the moment to end. The audience should feel that something fragile but undeniable is forming, something that neither of them fully understands yet. Show the relationship shifting from coincidence to intention. The audience should feel the first signs that both characters are drawn to each other, no longer just polite conversation, but a quiet desire to spend time together. Open book narrative progression. This part begins with the narrator admitting that he now looks for her, not obsessively, but with a quiet hope. And when he does see her again, the tone of their interaction changes. She, too, seems less guarded, more willing to let moments linger. They share more personal thoughts. Perhaps she mentions her fears of being misunderstood, or he admits to feeling uncertain about where his life is headed. The conversation has weight now. It's no longer about books, coffee, or weather. It's about them learning each other's hearts. Revolving hearts. Sensory-rich details. Set the scene in a place that allows intimacy without forcing it, maybe a quiet corner of the cafe, or a walk in the park where the path narrows and their steps fall in rhythm. Use gestures and closeness to build subtle tension. As they walk, their shoulders nearly touch, and neither moves away. She slows her steps so they can stay beside each other longer. He notices the softness of her laugh, how it lingers in the air like something he doesn't want to let go. When she speaks more vulnerably, describe how her voice lowers, as if she's offering him something delicate. His response is not to rush in, but to listen with genuine attention, creating a moment of trust. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. The age gap becomes an unspoken presence. She hesitates before sharing too much, as if reminding herself of the risk, not just of judgment from others, but of her own vulnerability. He feels the urge to reassure her but also respects her boundaries, holding back from saying what his heart is already whispering. Their connection grows in silence as much as in words. A long pause after a laugh, a glance that lasts a second too long, the shared warmth of walking side by side. The audience should feel the tension rising, yet kept just beneath the surface. Rose resolution hint, end this part with a moment of almost touch. Perhaps they sit together, and his hand rests near hers on the table, she doesn't move hers away. Or maybe, as they walk, their hands brush lightly, once, twice, before she finally lets her fingers graze his. It's small, fleeting, but unmistakably deliberate. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words. The narrator should open this part with reflection. I didn't mean to search for her, but each time I walked into that cafe, I caught myself hoping she'd be there. This sets the tone of growing awareness without overt confession. When they meet again, the dialogue should carry weight. She could mention something personal, like her fear of people underestimating her, or how she sometimes feels overlooked in a fast-moving world. He, in turn, admits his uncertainty about finding his place as a young man. Their differences in age become a source of connection rather than distance. Both feel slightly out of step with the world, and in each other's company, they feel understood. Sensory descriptions should heighten this closeness. As we walked, the evening air carried the faint scent of jasmine, and every so often her sleeve brushed against mine. Neither of us pulled away. She leaned in slightly as she spoke, her voice lower now, softer, as though her words were meant for me alone. The key here is restraint. They do not name the attraction yet. Instead, the part ends on that brush of hands, subtle, unspoken, but heavy with meaning. Both feel it. Neither comments on it. And that silence is what makes it powerful. Build romantic tension to its highest yet, that delicate space between friendship and something more. The audience should feel anticipation, hesitation, and the ache of unspoken desire. Open book narrative progression. By now, their meetings feel less like chance and more like choice. They've grown comfortable enough to share longer stretches of time together, perhaps an evening walk after coffee, or a lingering conversation long after others have gone home. Here, the narrator notices a shift. She isn't just letting him close, she wants him close. Yet, she holds back, fighting with herself over the lines she's afraid to cross. The narrator feels this battle. He doesn't push, but he can no longer pretend the attraction is just in his mind. Revolving hearts, sensory-rich details. The setting should mirror the emotional tension, perhaps twilight, when day and night blur, or a quiet room where lamplight softens the shadows. Focus on the near touches. She sits beside him instead of across, their knees nearly brushing. He leans in to show her something on his phone or a page of a book, and he feels the warmth of her shoulder close to his. Her laughter fades into silence, and in that pause, their eyes meet and hold just a fraction too long. Describe the sensory weight of those silences, the thrum of his pulse, the warmth of her breath just close enough to notice. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. This part should highlight her inner resistance. She reminds herself, perhaps even aloud, half in jest, that they shouldn't spend so much time together. She pulls back, then moments later drifts closer again, as if torn between reason and desire. The narrator respects her distance but doesn't deny the truth of what he feels. His restraint, rather than weakening the tension, makes it stronger. It shows his care, his unwillingness to reduce her to just a fleeting attraction. Rose resolution hint. End this part with a moment that teeters on the edge of confession or physical closeness, but stops just shy. For example, they walk side by side, and for a breathless instant, their hands almost intertwine before she slips hers back into her coat pocket. Or she lingers at the door when saying goodbye, her eyes lingering on his lips before she looks away. The audience should feel the ache of something that almost happened, and the promise that it still could. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words. Begin with a reflection from the narrator. By then, our meetings no longer felt accidental. She didn't say it, and neither did I, but we both kept finding reasons to stay. This sets the tone that their bond has become intentional, even if unspoken. As they spend time together, show how ordinary moments carry extraordinary weight. A shared cup of tea, a quiet bench in the park, or even walking down a city street, everything becomes heightened because of the subtle closeness between them. She may tease him lightly about his age, perhaps as a shield, but her voice betrays warmth. He may answer playfully, yet beneath the surface, both know it's not just a joke, it's the line they are afraid of crossing. Use sensory detail to emphasize restraint. When she shifted closer, the faint brush of her knee against mine felt like a spark I wasn't supposed to notice, but couldn't ignore. Her voice dropped softer when she asked me a question, as if the answer mattered more than it should. Close the part with a moment that ends in silence rather than resolution. She may smile faintly, as though about to speak, then shake her head and step back. Or he may walk away, only to glance back and find her still watching him. The goal is to leave the listener suspended in that exquisite tension, the feeling of almost, not yet, but soon. Deliver the emotional payoff of built-up tension. The audience should feel breathless relief when the distance between them finally breaks, not through grand declarations, but through a quiet, tender moment of intimacy. Open book narrative progression. This part begins with another evening together. Perhaps she agrees to walk with him a little farther than usual, or invites him to sit for just a few more minutes. What was once hesitation is now a kind of surrender. She no longer pretends she doesn't want his company. Their conversation drifts deeper, into personal fears, unspoken regrets, or moments of vulnerability. She admits, softly, that she sometimes feels alone despite the life she has built. He confesses that he doesn't always know where he belongs in the world. In their honesty, they discover comfort. Revolving Heart's sensory-rich details set the atmosphere where intimacy feels natural, a park bench at dusk, the quiet of a living room with only a lamp lit, or even a balcony overlooking the city at night. The nearness becomes impossible to ignore, their hands rest close, and this time, when they brush, neither moves away. She leans back slightly, her shoulder against his, her warmth seeping through the thin layers of fabric. His voice lowers as he speaks, as if sharing a secret, and she listens with her eyes fixed on his face rather than his words. Finally, the restraint cracks. She may rest her hand lightly on his, a deliberate choice this time. Or he may reach across to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch is small, gentle, but it carries the weight of everything unsaid. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. Even in this closeness, hesitation lingers. She may whisper, "We shouldn't," or pull back for a second, only to find herself leaning in again. He respects her every pause, never rushing, which only deepens her trust. The conflict here isn't external, it's entirely inside her. She feels the fear of stepping into something new, against convention, but she also feels the undeniable pull of wanting to be seen, wanted, and cherished. Rose resolution hint, end this part with their first true, lingering gesture of affection. It could be a quiet embrace, her arms slipping around him as if she's finally letting herself fall. Or a tender kiss on the cheek, so close to his lips that the air between them feels charged. It should not feel rushed or dramatic. Instead, it should feel inevitable, the culmination of everything that's been building. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words open with the narrator reflecting. By then, it no longer felt like chance or hesitation. It felt like choice. She chose to stay a little longer, and I chose not to let go of the moment. As they share their fears, use sensory imagery to heighten vulnerability. For example, her voice trembled just slightly when she said she hated the silence of her apartment at night. I wanted to tell her she would never have to face it alone again, but I only nodded, listening. When I admitted I often felt like I was drifting through life, her hand found mine. Not as reassurance, not even as comfort, but as if she understood without words. The breakthrough moment should arrive naturally. Let her act first, even subtly, to show that this is not a one-sided attraction. Her leaning against his shoulder, her hand resting atop his, these small acts are louder than words. End part 5 with a long, quiet pause, one in which both characters understand what has changed. They don't need to say it. The silence itself is the answer, stir unease, tenderness, and longing. The audience should feel the fragility of their bond, the fear that what has just begun could slip away, but also the hope that it will endure. Open book narrative progression. After the first undeniable closeness in part 5, reality sets in. She withdraws slightly, either the very next day or during their next meeting. The warmth is still there, but her guard is back in place. She worries aloud, not angrily, but gently, about what they're doing. Maybe she questions if it's fair to him, or if people would ever understand. She admits her fears of being judged, of making a mistake, of letting herself be vulnerable after years of protecting her heart. The narrator listens, torn between wanting to reassure her and knowing he cannot erase those fears with words. He admits his own uncertainty, but he also speaks of what he feels, that being with her doesn't feel like confusion, it feels like clarity. Revolving heart's sensory-rich details. This part should take place somewhere quieter, perhaps at her home or in a quiet park in the early evening. The intimacy of the setting contrasts with the emotional distance she is trying to create. Focus on the hesitations in body language. She folds her arms, then slowly uncrosses them, as though she doesn't want to push him away but doesn't know how to stay close either. He reaches for her hand, and for a moment she lets him hold it, then pulls away, not sharply, but with a sigh, her eyes filled with conflict. The pauses between their words feel heavy, like silence threatening to swallow everything they've built. Balance scale conflict or hesitation. This is the moment of their first true conflict. Not an argument, but the weight of reality pressing on them. She voices the doubts they've both been carrying. You're young, maybe too young to know what this means. I've lived long enough to know how people look at things like this. He, in turn, struggles to balance honesty and restraint. He tells her he doesn't care about what others think, but he doesn't push her, he leaves the choice in her hands. Rose resolution hint. Instead of breaking apart, they take a step toward healing. Perhaps she lets him hold her hand again, this time without pulling away. Or she admits softly that she wants him, even if she's afraid. The part should end with a fragile but hopeful image. Maybe they sit in silence, her head eventually resting against his shoulder, not as surrender, but as a quiet agreement to keep trying. Sparkle's expanded script guidance. 500 words begin with the narrator reflecting on the shift. The next time I saw her, something was different. The warmth was there, but her eyes carried the weight of unspoken questions. Her hesitation should be written with compassion. She's not cold, she's protective of herself, cautious of what it means to open her heart again. When she speaks of doubt, her tone should be soft, as though she's trying to protect them both. Use sensory detail to show her conflict. Her hand lingered on the edge of the table, fingers twitching slightly as though she wanted to reach for mine but held herself back. When she sighed, it wasn't frustration I heard, it was fear, quiet and human. The narrator should respond not with certainty, but with sincerity. His words should acknowledge the risk while affirming his choice. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. But I know that when I'm with you, it feels like where I'm meant to be. End this section with a tender gesture that says what words cannot. Her resting her head on his shoulder, or her finally taking his hand again, should feel like a promise, fragile, but real. Give the audience closure, warmth, and a quiet ache. The story should end with reflection rather than drama, her voice carrying the weight of what has been learned, what has been chosen, and what love means at this stage of life. Open book narrative progression. The story shifts to her perspective in a soft, reflective monologue, almost as if she's speaking directly to the listener, or to herself in a private confession. She recounts how unexpected this connection was, how she resisted, and how she slowly allowed herself to trust again. She acknowledges the fears that still linger, but she frames them within the deeper truth, that connection, no matter how unlikely, is worth choosing when it brings light to the heart. Revolving heart's sensory-rich details. Her words should recall small sensory moments that defined their bond, the warmth of his hand when she finally let herself hold it. The way his eyes softened when she spoke of things she hadn't told anyone else. The sound of his laughter, reminding her of youth and possibility. Each detail should feel intimate and grounded, not grand or exaggerated, because what makes their love real are not sweeping gestures, but the small, human moments they shared. Balance scale conflict or hesitation, even here, she acknowledges the weight of doubt. She doesn't pretend it's easy. She admits she may always wonder what others think, or if time will change what they feel. But she also admits that letting fear rule her life has never brought her peace, and choosing him, despite uncertainty, feels like freedom. Rose's resolution hint, end on a tone of acceptance and warmth. She doesn't need to declare everlasting certainty, instead, she embraces the present, the joy of being seen, wanted, and cherished. The final image should be one of quiet intimacy, such as her describing the comfort of leaning against him, or the steadiness of his arms around her. Sparkle's expanded script guidance, 500 words begin with her voice, steady, gentle, tinged with vulnerability. I didn't expect him. I didn't expect any of this. At first, I thought it was a passing kindness, a conversation that would fade like all the others. But then, he kept showing up. Not just in places, but in ways I didn't know I needed. She reflects on the tension, the nights she lay awake telling herself it was impossible, and the way she almost convinced herself to walk away. Then she recalls the moments that broke her walls, his quiet listening, his patient silences, his willingness to let her set the pace. Bring in sensory callbacks. I remember the first time our hands touched and neither of us moved away. It was such a small thing, but it felt like the world had shifted under my feet. The way he looked at me, not past me, not through me, but at me, reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of being wanted. She admits her fears without apology. I'm still afraid, if I'm honest. Afraid of the years between us, afraid of what people might whisper, afraid of giving too much of myself. But what I'm more afraid of, is losing the way he makes me feel. Close with warmth, not finality, so I choose this. I choose him. I don't know where it will lead, or how the years will treat us. But tonight, I know this, when his arms are around me, when his hand finds mine in the quiet. I feel safe. I feel seen. And for the first time in a long time, I feel alive. The final line should linger like a soft breath, not a grand promise, but a human truth.